Hello, my name is Manuela Rumsey, and I'm a licensed American real estate agent in Vicenza, Italy. For my series, Buying a House in Italy 101, I interviewed Enrico Povolo. Enrico is an international tax consultant based here in Vicenza. He frequently advises high net worth individuals who are contemplating moving to Italy and would like to understand the tax implications if they do so. Enrico also advises on wealth management and many other related matters. I think you'll find this interview very worthwhile. Hi, Enrico. Thank you so much for taking the time
My
today
pleasure.
to talk to me. Why don't we start by just telling us about yourself and your background, Enrico?
I am an international tax consultant. I work mainly for US persons, for US people, US people want to move to who want to move to Italy, or also for people that want to make investments in Italy, and also for Italian people that wants to move to the US. But mostly right now is US people that wants to move to Italy. So we do the general tax planning of the situation, and we also consider the wealth planning of the entire family, and also with considering the trust and generational passages over the generation like children and grandchildren. So this is basically the realm of our consultation.
And how long have you been working in this way, focusing on this market as an international tax
It's
consultant?
quite a long amount of years because I started specializing in this kind of US-Italy relation in 1999. So it's quite 25 years, you know. So it's quite a lot, and yes, the expertise right now is I would say is pretty good.
Yeah. And do you see more people coming to Italy? Like,
Yes, yes. People like the flow of people were like 50-50 until I would say 5 years ago. But after COVID, especially, the flow of people coming from the US was much, much bigger, and now it's basically almost skyrocketing. So it's yes, it's much more US people wanting to move to Italy than the opposite.
and you mentioned private individuals and families. Is that your focus, or do you advise companies who?
We also advise companies. We also advise companies that wants to make investments in the US or in Italy. So we do also the corporation part. It's not only individuals, but we are more focused. The bulk of our clients is more on the personal side, on the individuals, on the families, on people who have investments and wants to decide how to manage internationally their life between Italy and the US, sometimes involving also other countries like UK, France, Switzerland, so forth.
So when people are looking at eventually moving to Italy, maybe not today, but perhaps next year or in 2 years, should they get in touch with you right away to begin the process,
I
or
will
what
say
would you?
that a good idea. This is a very good question because I will say that it is much better to do somehow a planning. I will say that having the idea of what is going on is fundamental because you have to know a certain number of things that we will talk in a second, and so you get to get familiar with that. You have to understand the consequence of certain things that you maybe don't understand immediately and that can be counterintuitive. So I will say that planning is for sure extremely important. We also advise people that have already come to Italy, already moved to Italy, but obviously sometimes they are in the position which they have already make some mistake. So in that situation, it's a little more complicated to give them assistance because there are something that have already been done or not done. So in this situation, planning is for sure highly suggested.
Okay.
Sure.
The most important thing, and I know this is a really complicated area and there are a lot of variables, but if you could tell people what the most important thing is that they need to know about taxes if they're thinking seriously about moving to Italy, could you like?
I will say that the first and most important concept is to understand the concept of tax residency. Tax residency is the most crucial concept because it's different and it's a little counterintuitive. You can be resident, like have vital records in a certain place, like in Vicenza, like we are right now, but you can at the same time not be tax resident. So, for example, I'll make you some examples to make you understand. Suppose that you move to Italy, I would say, in September 2025, okay? And then you live in Italy for the rest of 2025, okay? So you get your vital records into the municipality of Vicenza, that is called Ufficio Anagrafe. So you get enlisted there, and you are technically resident from an administrative point of view, okay? But you have spent in 2025 less than 183 days in Italy. So for this reason, you are not tax resident for that year, okay? You will become tax resident in 2026 when you will stay in Italy longer than 183 days, okay? So the first point is to understand that tax residency is mostly, but not only, connected to the number of days that you have spent in Italy, okay? So this is the first concept. If you are tax resident in Italy, you have to pay taxes in Italy for the income that you produce in Italy, but also in the US. Okay, so this is very important to understand. If you are not tax resident in Italy, like for example in the example that I told you before, in 2025, you will be considered non-resident from a tax point of view, and you will pay taxes in Italy only on the income that is produced in Italy. For example, if you have a house, you give an house for rent in Italy, then you will pay taxes on that. Okay, so the important concept to understand when you acquire tax residency or not, if you are tax resident or not. Tax residency is not an easy concept, and it needs some assistance by a professional. So it's not very easy to understand if you are tax resident or not. But the first and most important variable is for sure the number of days that you have spent in Italy.
So a U.S. citizen then cannot live in Italy year-round without paying taxes.
No, no, no. This is not possible because for sure, if a person moves to Italy and stays in Italy for the entire year, for sure she will be tax resident in Italy, and so she will have to pay taxes in Italy on the worldwide income. So this is the first concept. So this is something that is not possible.
But I think there's also something that people can do or in the calculation of their taxes that helps sort of offset. There's a double taxation treaty.
Yes, yes. You don't have to pay taxes twice, basically. Okay. The point is that, for example, let's suppose that you are tax resident in Italy for a certain year. Okay. So what do you have to do? You have to basically, the tax deadline for the US is 15th of April. Okay. So you don't have to pay and file the US tax return by April 15th. You have to file an extension and postpone the deadline for the filing until mid-October, okay, October 15. In the meantime, you file Italian tax return, you pay the taxes by the end of July, and you pay the entire taxes on the worldwide income, Italian income and US income in Italy. Then you file the US tax return because you have to file also because of citizenship in the US. Even if you are tax resident in Italy and you have to file Italian tax return because you are a resident here, you have to file the US tax return because of citizenship. So in the October 15 US tax return, you will report again all the incomes, but you calculate the US taxes, but you can offset from that taxes the taxes that you are paid in Italy. So you have a possibility of using the Italian taxes as a foreign tax credit against the US taxes. In this way, you avoid the double taxation issues. The point is obviously that you have to know all these kind of things, and also the Italian professional in the US CPA must, get and coordinate and communicate because obviously the two tax returns must be connected to have the possibility of avoiding double taxation issues. So this is something that is quite important.
What about working in Italy? A lot of people come here on an elective residency visa, but there might be restrictions on working. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. Elective residence visa is a very interesting kind of visa, but it's important to understand that you cannot work in Italy with an elective residence visa because elective residence visa is designed for people who come to Italy and, for example, and don't work at all. And then I will specify to you what that means. Especially like people they have an income, but their income is a passive income, like pension, like rents, like dividends, interest, capital gains, or royalties. But you cannot come to Italy with an elective residence visa and work. If instead you work for when you are under an elective residence visa, you have several problems. Because the first problem is that if you get caught, you know, you have a situation in which the tax authority will ask you to give them your US tax return, and if they see that you have an income reported in the US tax return that is not reported in Italy, they will immediately start a tax litigation against you. So this is the first, the tax audit and a tax litigation. And the second thing, you have the risk of losing the elective residence visa because you have worked while you were under the elective residence visa. So the permit of stay is basically forbidding the working under the elective residence visa. And it's important to understand this because if you come to Italy and you are an employee of a US business or US company, or you have a self-employment position in the US and you come to Italy and you work here, you have to understand that that kind of income is not a US source income, is an Italian source income. Okay, so in that situation, the income becomes Italian. So in this way, for example, if you are like a YouTuber or whatever you want to be, you cannot be in Italy with an elective residence visa.
So it's not just paid employment, the conventional kind of employment that we tend to think of where you go to work for a company and then you
Sure.
receive a salary, but also other forms of employment that you can't do.
Yes, it's the income is produced in the country where the worker lives. Okay, so the point is this is an international rule. So in this way, if you live in Italy, your income is produced in Italy. That means that in this situation, you have to report the income in Italy for sure, and you have to have a visa that is that lets you that give you the possibility of doing this kind of job. Like for example, for the YouTuber example that I mentioned before, they cannot come to Italy with an elective residence visa. They can come to Italy with a digital nomad visa. Okay, so it's another kind of visa. They can come here, they can open a business here. If they choose the digital nomad visa and they come to Italy and they work remotely for a US company or for themselves, they can have a very good some advantages also. For example, if you open a self-employed position in Italy as a YouTuber, for example, you can make an election and pay Social Security in the US because there is a convention also on Social Security administration between Italy and the US. So you don't have to pay Social Security in Italy. You can pay self-employment tax in the US. The second advantage is that you can be paid like your US clients can pay you in your US bank account, so you don't have to open an Italian bank account and get the payment in your Italian bank account. But mostly, the most important advantage is the fact that you can apply for a tax break that is called regime impatriati. And with this regime, you can reduce your taxable income in Italy by 50% for 8 years. Okay, 50%, a reduction of 50% of the taxable income means a reduction of taxes by 70% because the tax rate are progressive. Okay, so if you reduce the taxable income by 50%, the reduction of the taxes is quite big. So it is much better to get the right visa, get the information correctly, and start open the Italian partita IVA, the self-employed position, and then you can have a lot of beneficial effects like making the election and pay social security, having the tax break in Italy, and everything is fine.
It's good to know because I'm sure a lot of people don't realize that even something that seems like more of a hobby,
Yeah,
like a YouTuber, that could actually something that could get them into hot water.
if you get an income out of that, if it's like a total hobby, no compensation, nothing, then you have no problem. But if it's something that's it's a work for you or for the person, well, yes, you have to consider the tax and the visa effects of that for sure.
Yeah, okay. So people who might be more interested in elective residency visa, you talked about pensions and royalties and so on. It sounds like it's really meant for someone who's completely retired.
It is for people that are retired or retiring or that can live on their, for example, IRA, 401k, Roth IRA, or for people that are wealthy and that they don't need to work and they move to Italy because they just want to, enjoy the Italian lifestyle and they just, can live because they have like properties in the US or they have investments, financial investments in the US. So this is something that it is more focused on that kind of people for sure.
Okay. Can people do things in Italy to optimize their tax situation here so that they take advantage of whatever tax breaks are available?
Yes, there are several things that we can do. Obviously, considering we have to consider the entire situation of the family of the person involved. One possibility is to set up a U.S. trust, or maybe to reorganize some U.S. trust if there are some. Because putting some, especially of the financial assets, into a U.S. trust can be a way of optimizing taxation. We have to consider anyway that trusts are, complex tools, very flexible, very interesting, but they are also, if you do that, you don't do that only to optimize your taxation, but you do that also for like generational passage of wealth to your children, your grandchildren, and or to your wife, to your husband, whatever you want. So basically, you do that, but the taxation effects is only part of a bigger plan. So in that case, you make an overall planning of the situation, and you work. And we do that in connection with the U.S. tax lawyer in order to give the family the possibility of dealing with this international region. For example, sometimes you have a children living in Italy and the other children living in the US and another living in Japan, for example, okay? Because now the family are becoming more and more international. So in this situation, obviously, you have to find an overall strategy.
Well, speaking of strategies, if people buy property here and they get a mortgage, because a common thing that people do in the U.S. to reduce their taxes is to deduct the mortgage interest, or at least they used to. Can people do that here? Is that something that people can take
Yeah.
advantage of?
Yes, you can do that for every 100 euro of interest that you pay, you get a deduction of 19 euros. So 19% is the tax deduction that you get. There are some requirements, and keep in mind that the mortgage must be Italian. Okay, so you cannot must be of an Italian bank. It cannot be of a foreign bank. So this is the first requirements. The other requirements is that you have to move your residency, your address. You have to go to live into the house in the following 12 months after the buying of the house. Okay, so it's something that you have to keep in mind because it's different from the 18 months that you can have for the other kind of advantages like having the beneficio prima casa. So in that situation, you have 12 months of deadline to move your address inside the house. But yes, you can do that.
Is there any limit to the amount that people can deduct? It's 19 euros for every 100 euros of interest, but for example, can people deduct more than 1,000 or 2,000 euros from their taxes?
No, there is no tax limit. There is no tax limit basically. So you can deduct a lot if you have a big amount of money. So it's not a problem.
Oh, okay. What about any advantages that people might get from transferring their assets from the US or anywhere else to Italy? Is there a tax benefit to doing that?
No, I will say no, in the sense that it's quite neutral. It's quite neutral, that there is only one thing that I will mention. It's neutral in the sense that if you have an asset that produces an income, the income is taxed if the asset is in Italy or if the house is in the US, and taxation is the same. So moving the asset is neutral from the point of view of the income tax. If there is only one thing that there is on the brokerage account, on the brokerage accounts that you have in the US, you have a wealth tax of 0.2% that you have to pay to Italy every year. Okay, so for for example, if you have 20 millions of assets in the US, in this situation you will have to pay 20,000 euro per year as wealth tax. So in this situation, if you move the 20 millions in Italy, you won't pay that tax anymore. But obviously, when you make this kind of planning, you have to consider, the best place where to put your money. You can, in generally speaking, you can leave your asset in the US and you can move to Italy. So there is no problem about dealing with this kind of situation. So we are used to doing that.
Great. If people want to know more about tax matters and the advice that you give, you have a website and you also have, I believe, Instagram profile. That's how
yes,
found out about
Instagram
you.
profile, but mostly I have an internet a blog where I put a lot of articles when I update, and so you can follow my blog there. And if you have any question, you can send me an email or you can get a call, so we can get in touch. If you need some information, we can chat about that.
And you're here in Vicenza, Italy, right?
Yes, I'm in Vicenza.
Great.
Right now.
Okay, and I'll make sure to include all of your links and information in this video as well as on YouTube.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right. Enrico frequently blogs in English about a wide variety of financial and tax matters. You can get in contact with Enrico through the links that I put below this video. If you're interested in buying property in Italy and would like representation, please contact me through my website, www.italyhomebuyer.com. And until the next time from Vicenza, arrivederci.